Beach at Boca Raton. The last time we saw him, the wind was blowing very, very strong. Well, it's even worse now. Gary, tell us about it.
Well, Dave, it's nights like this that make you marvel at the power of Mother Nature. Since we talked to you about a half hour ago, the conditions have deteriorated markedly. Right now, the winds are coming in reportedly at 60 miles per hour. And a lot of people here in the southern Palm Beach County area, this is Boca Raton, thought that it wouldn't be that bad. They heard the center of the storm was going to be passing over Dade County. But if the center of the storm is passing over Dade County, which it's going to be very soon in the next few hours, you fooled a lot of people here who haven't been through a hurricane before, who don't realize that the northwest quadrant of the storm, which is coming over Boca Raton, inflicts a lot of fury of its own. And that's what it's doing right now. Meteorologists in the area say this area is being hit harder than most other areas in Florida at this very moment. The rain is coming down very heavy. Only a little over 3 hours ago, it was calm. It's like 5-mile-an-hour wind. There was no rain. And as we've told you before, it fooled a lot of people here. A lot of people decided not to leave when they saw that conditions weren't that bad. But right now, it's extremely dangerous. Police are doing their best right now in the streets of Boca Raton, the streets of Boynton Beach and Delray Beach, the streets of Deerfield Beach, which is in Broward County, just to the south of here, trying to get people off the roads, off the beach areas, off the barrier islands that make up Southeast Florida. One of the major problems here is that people in Southeast Florida still talk about Hurricane Betsy in 1965 and Hurricane David in 1979 as terrible calamities, and indeed they were. They killed a lot of people, but they weren't direct hits here in South Florida. South Florida's gone decades without a direct hit from a hurricane. Tomorrow morning, they're going to be getting a direct hit. Right now, even though the hurricane is still 100 miles or more off the coast of Florida, the conditions are very dangerous. So that's the situation right here in Boca Raton. This is Gary Tuckman, CNN Live, Boca Raton, Florida. Dave?
Gary, whatever that weather jacket you have, you're about to lose it, obviously. You've increased in wind speed about 10 miles an hour just from the last half hour we talked to you. Now, I know you're on the beach itself, but is it as bad inland from where you are?
That's a good question, Dave. It's not as bad inland. If you go 5 or 6 miles inland, even 2 or 3 miles, it's not nearly as windy, and that's why it's very sensible advice, common sense. Go inland 2 or 3 miles. Go to a friend's home. Go somewhere where it's a lot safer, because anywhere near the coast is very dangerous. And please excuse this coat I'm wearing here. This wasn't the biggest investment I made, unfortunately. My other raincoat got lost, and that's what happens. The buttons have all broken on this coat, so I'm sorry to be so distracted.
Considering the conditions you're in, Gary, you're doing very well. Thank you, Gary Tuckman of Boca Raton. Brian.
Power. Moving a lot of water on shore. You get the moon and the tides adding to that, the height of the water. So as Dr. Sheets, I believe, said a moment ago, it adds about a foot, maybe more, to the storm surge. At 5:01, the high tide will be reached at Miami Harbor, and in addition to that, it looks like the storm will be making its full force felt on the shore at approximately that time. Look at the storm now. Its track now to the west at 17 miles an hour. It would appear that as it is getting into the Gulf Stream, it's picking up a little bit of intensity. Right now, maximum sustained winds running about 125 miles an hour, maybe a little bit more than that. And by the way, for our international viewers, the storm center is within 60 miles now of the shore of Miami, and that translates to about 96, 97 kilometers. You can see the storm as it's making its progress towards the shore. And Brian, as you pointed out earlier, too, keep in mind that the west coast, the Gulf Coast of Florida, is also under a warning. It's very, very important to remember that this storm is going to travel right across Florida. It could pick up a little more strength as we get into the Gulf Stream the next hour to 3 hours. It could pick up some
devastating damage to southeastern Florida, primarily in the Miami Beach area, and on to the south. Again, we're talking pressure here of 936 millibars. If you were with us a couple of hours ago, we were talking as much as 941 to 947. It has now deepened once again, apparently, and this is a pretty good accurate reading of your central pressure. As they dropped, the recon plane dropped a sounding in there and found exactly that pressure. 27.64 inches. We have sustained winds now, 140 miles per hour, and a westward motion at 17 miles per hour. And as John Hope was saying just a few minutes ago, this hurricane has been on 25.4 north for a very long time. It is making a beeline for the Florida coast at the present time. Within 60 miles of the coast, 25.4 north, 79.3 west. And that will bring it on to perhaps 10 to 20 miles north just of the eye wall. So that's why we're especially concerned about South Miami.
West at near 18 miles per hour, seems to be accelerating. It is currently 40 miles east of Miami, which means landfall within the next 2 hours. I'm now joined by our specialist, our hurricane specialist, John Hope. John, a major hurricane about to make landfall.
Yes, you're right. It won't be any more than 2 hours. So the weather Dennis has right there is going to get a lot worse. It's going to do that in a hurry. And certainly the full fury of the hurricane will be in there within 2 hours.
What can we expect now that the hurricane's about to make landfall? As it moves to the west coast of Florida, what can they expect?
Well, it's going to move across the state, a very narrow portion of the state, and do so pretty rapidly. And it may diminish slightly as it goes over land, but it's not going to be over there long enough to make much difference. And just as soon as it hits the Gulf of Mexico, it will gain back most of what it lost, I believe.
And then once it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, it looks like it's going to hit inland someplace later this week.
Yes, I think there's not much doubt about that. Now, we haven't been able to pinpoint the spot yet, but folks up there along the northern Gulf Coast certainly want to watch this very, very carefully.
Okay, I want to go back to this radar if we could and ask you a couple of questions. Here's the eye. Why is it so bright right around the eye itself?
Okay, that is the eye wall that we see there, and that is the
So for the Boca Raton area is supposed to reach the mark of about 4, 6, possibly 8 feet. We went down onto the beach a little while ago. We were standing about 15 feet away from the edge of the water, and at that point, one wave came right up and came right over our ankles, really almost up to our knees. It just washed right past us. So there's apparently no telling when it is that some of the strongest waves and some of the strongest water is going to come.
Control room that they're ready to go.
Yeah.
Whenever we are ready to go. So I'll tell you what, why don't we get our maps together, and why don't you folks at home. There, John? Okay, great. We'll get our maps together so that we can continue with specific information, and theoretically, we're going to be set to be in exactly the same situation that we are here, and just I've had these maps for a long time. Any stupid hurricane out there.
Properly, even as a Category 4 hurricane is making its way toward us.
We can hear it clearly. I know you folks at home can't hear it, but clearly we can hear it outside. Let me see. I'm all wireless. I'll tell you what, maybe, Raphael, you could find a couple batteries here to bring in here as we go in here so that we don't run out of power. Although we're going to, I guess Tony has a mic in here that we can use no matter what happens battery-wise.
Here we are, Brian. We're all set. We're all set. I'll tell you what, this is the safest spot, without a doubt, here at the station. As you mentioned, it is all cement enclosed. In fact, John, you can just widen out just a minute. We can tell people where we are. This is an old equipment storage room here. In fact, you can see a lot of the old WTVJ equipment, wires and light fixtures being hung. And as Brian indicated, this is
a little bit lighter in nature as we head into the heart of the storm. The Dolphins have called off all of their practices. Coach Shula said that, yes, they have a game coming up on Thursday, but nothing is more important than the players' families, and told them that just take time off, ride this storm out with the families as best they can, and they'll make new plans getting ready for their game on Thursday in Baltimore as the storm goes past. So we sent Steve Shapiro up to Joe Robbie Stadium, where, believe it or not, the players don't have to be there, but Joe Robbie Stadium is a fairly safe place to be. Here's Steve's report.
Of Charleston experienced a Category 2 hurricane. Well, the eye was bigger there, and that narrow band of damage was 20 miles displaced from the eye, and it happened to hit in the Francis Marion National Forest, which is a huge national forest north of Charleston, the only place on the entire east coast of the United States that's not inhabited.
Is that right?
One and only place. The reason that Hurricane Hugo was not anywhere near as devastating a storm as it deserved to be based on its size and strength is because it happened to hit that little narrow thing, threaded the needle into that little narrow spot, that little slot on the coast. Now, clearly tonight that is not happening. That little narrow band is threading the needle on the city of Miami.